we know that the fact that we're seeing higher death rates from cancer today isn't due to the fact that we are more successfully able to prevent other previously fatal diseases from becoming fatal, such as heart disease, which people used to die all the time of the kind of heart attacks that are now no longer fatal, just as an example?
We'll both answer it because she worked in this field too. There's always seemingly a skepticism and a trade-off. If you look at, for instance, the work of my colleague Dr. Campbell up at Cornell, he went to our government as, by the way, the #1 purveyor of dietary information 2 different times here in the United States, and said to the United States government, meat and dairy is killing people. Will you help us do research on that? And went around the world and couldn't find any takers except communist China. And that's why his landmark, phenomenal research published in 1990, the academic research called the China Study, did such a brilliant job showing you that it's not because we died earlier from other things, because that's a misnomer too, by the way. That's statistical manipulation. And what you have to understand is that that book was distilled, and many of the people sitting here and listening around the world have seen it, into the China Study, where I said, even if you don't know how to read, look at the charts. Countries that eat meat and dairy, which, by the way, contain more genetic modification, more chemicals, and retain more radiation. So the more fat you have in your body, the more saturated fat, the more GMO, the more chemicals, and the more radioactivity will maintain in there. That's why people are getting the cancer. So that's why we know it. Add your part to it.
Okay. Well, as a cancer epidemiologist, what we can say is this. Yes, some small part of the increase in cancer is due to the fact that people are living longer. But we also know that the rate of cancer per 100,000 people per certain age groups has changed. So, as Brian just said, the rate of childhood cancer has risen 30% since 1970. Adjusted for the number of children, the probability of getting cancer is higher today for any child in the United States of America than it has ever been. So that for children under 5, cancer is now the leading cause of death in young children. It was not before. And it's not that children are getting older faster, okay? We can also look at what's called the age-specific rate. So that means, what is the rate of cancer for people aged 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and up? When we do that, we adjust for the number of people in that age group. And when we do that, and when we look internationally, which is another project Environmental Health Trust is trying to finish, we see that brain cancer is increasing in young persons. But we have, in order to get those data,
Not only increasing, shockingly increasing.
Yes, and in order to get those data on these shocking increases in brain cancer in young people, we can't just press a few buttons on a computer, because the cancer registries in these countries don't provide it in that fashion. We have to analyze it and put it into certain constructs and parameters that we can evaluate it. And when we do that, a young colleague of mine who was my postdoc and is now an assistant professor at Pittsburgh and I published in the journal Cancer, published by the American Cancer Society, that the generation of people born in the 1950s has between 1.2 to 2 times more cancer than the generation born at the turn of the century, adjusted for all of these other things. It's called a cohort analysis. We look at the birth cohort, and we find that if you take away smoking-related cancers in toto, which we did, and you take away all the diagnostic cancers that have improved because of PSA testing and mammography screening, which may cause as many breast cancers as it finds, by the way, when you take out all of those cancers, screening detected and smoking-related, we published in 2010 a significant increase in generational risk occurring adjusted for aging of the population. So you can do the analyses. Most people have glazed over by now. It's late, and I'm talking about statistics. But the reality is public health statistics are human beings with the tears removed.
Absolutely.
And we need to do a better job of explaining that to the public so that people will understand there is a real increase in cancer in middle-aged persons that we did not have before. One of the strongest arguments for there to be environmental causes comes from studies of twins. Identical twins come from one egg, splits in two at conception, monozygotic identical twins. In Scandinavia, they have twin registries. And those registries show that identical twins at age 3 look pretty close to identical. At age 50, they do not have the same cancer. If they really were, it was all genetic, you'd get them to have the same cancer. And in fact, you can look at methylation patterns in the genes in these identical twins, and where they look identical at age 3, at age 50, they don't even look like they're related to one another. It's a very powerful argument for why the environment is important. So we say that genes give you the gun, and the environment pulls the trigger.